that direction?
It's a great question, though. Like, it's one of the problems we're having right now. Not problems, but things we're thinking about is we've been remote since the beginning, right? And so and it's something I've been doing for a long time. So it feels very natural to me to do all of this. But getting people together, but our workforce is literally spread from, Central Europe through Brazil to China and like all over, because we just pull from all over the globe from where we can find the best talent. And so trying to find ways to get everybody together in person. Pre-COVID, actually, we had a lot of like individual meetups planned in like Paris, and then we were going to do one in the Middle East, and we were going to do one out in like Asia, like little individual get-togethers. But yeah, having an all hands somewhere when you start to get teams of hundreds of people from around the globe together, you end up renting a whole resort in Cancun, which I know people end up doing. But still an unsolved problem of how you like really like keep these teams together. Maybe on like that's kind of a question for everybody, like on a team level, like on I specifically think about engineering because I'm the CTO, but like keep individual functional teams to get together. It's interesting. It's a tough,
Barb, I assume you had to do that at InVision.
Yeah.
Just wondering how you guys did that, because like SignalWire and InVision were both intentionally distributed by the start, whereas Wombi's got a different challenge, which is a really amazing culture that was based on everyone being together, and then how to kind of change that. So I don't know, Barb, your thoughts on both of those questions.
Yeah, we at InVision, we brought people together as the entire company once per year, and just chose more cost-effective locations. So we rented out a whole resort, but on the outskirts of Phoenix. And it was great. And after about 700 people, it felt like maybe that wasn't offering the same level of value necessarily, because it ends up being more of a fun thing than extracting any real value. But even when we did that, we also had teams, like functional areas, have the budget to get together once per year as well, separate from that in person. And then obviously travel as needed, but we tried to embrace the model, right? If you're going to work virtually, be thoughtful about, when you're going to bring people together for travel. I will say the engineering teams had a larger, not larger than sales, obviously due to customers, not our need to have sales teams travel, but otherwise engineering had a pretty large budget, because not wanting to waste time, right? Getting product to market and some collaboration points that just felt like getting in a room together and hashing something out made good sense. We did bring people together. On your global piece, something else we did was, even for virtual calls, we just tried to be good global citizens and forced like US time zones to shift their day and take an all hands call that works for European time zones, stuff like that, so that you can get a feel for what folks on the other side of the world feel all the time when we send them meeting invites during our business day, which happens in every company, accidentally or on purpose. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's something we're very well aware of, right? It's from the very beginning. We have a lot of colleagues in Europe, in particular. So that 9-hour shift to CEST is a big one for, at least on the Pacific time zone. So, it's interesting. It's tough. I do think that, on some of these levels, a lot of these people we've hired, have never met anybody in the team in real life. I'm actually thinking about my son's school too. Like, he's never met his first grade teacher. They just the other day went to like pick up some materials, and he met her for the first time, and his answer was, "She's shorter than I thought she was going to be." But like simple things like that, right? Like, I don't know who these guys are, like, so it is part of it is that fun aspect of getting to know somebody, and then it makes the arguments you inevitably have over everything from technical direction to business direction so much more palatable when you're like, oh, remember that time we were in, the outskirts of Phoenix, and Dragos fell into the pool, like stuff like that, right? Really does go a long way.
Totally. We actually said that we thought the in-person interactions supercharged the virtual interactions that would occur thereafter. And so if you think of it, I like thinking of it that way. It's like, in what way are the in-person interactions like a battery pack, right? For your virtual interactions, and knowing when that battery pack needs to be recharged, and thinking about how that can work for you.
Mm-hmm.
I would think like Love Pop and Peloton might be closer, and curious as to when like you've got a direct consumer brand that's so important, and you really need your employees to kind of live that brand, and the transition from being together to being more virtual work to Peloton? I know, Wombi, if that's a challenge for you guys or not, but I would think Love Pop, to a certain extent, such a strong culture, and kind of keeping that as you transition must have been challenging.
Yeah, I think there's so many dimensions. Of course, in a lot of ways, when you were going through the presentation and the questions around like, are you ready for this? It did feel like we happened to be in a position where already most of the ways that the company was operating was seamless to go over to remote in the beginning of COVID. There really was not much that had to change, with one exception, which is the design process. This is our product. We design 3D paper art, so like beautiful flowers, and this is a
that's beautiful. Those are great.
There's a lot of like line review where we're going through like what's our Halloween collection, and then going through like concepts and designs, and I think that's been the toughest thing. Of course, we have a retail organization as well, and that doesn't work in the same way as remotely, of course, but for the product development, I think the two challenges are, one, like the color is different when you look at it in person versus on a screen, and calibrating everybody's screens and then really having good color understanding is not quite there. There's a feel, there's a texture, there's, exactly how well does it work that you can't fully get. And then there's also just, no matter what Zoom, there still aren't it's not the same as being in the same room with all the designs pinned to a board and being able to like talk about it there. So I think that's the biggest thing, and that's a piece that will still replicate in the office that we do have, is prototyping equipment for designers and some of that space. And we'll still come together in person for line reviews. So that part we'll have to fly people in that aren't in Boston to do that. Everyone else will just come in. But that's probably the only challenge there. I think the bigger trend and opportunity that we saw was just everyone wanted to know what's going on, and like you and your thing had, was everyone wanted a remote. Like there was no question that that's what the team wanted, and we're already global in the sense that we have the Vietnamese team. We have about 500 people in Vietnam, and then we have the Boston team and the retail team. And so as we build a company globally in terms of our marketing as well, it was, eventually like this whole concept of an office is going to be kind of a strange concept anyways, as we are spread out even more across geographies, and the tools are there, our people want it. Like, why would we not just make this move and then figure out how to make it a strategic advantage? So I think there are real cultural connection questions that we're working through. There's product design questions, but we'll figure it all out.
So I think there are ways to fill the gaps on culture. I would say it's been a while since I felt as connected to some of my coworkers as I felt at Envision, and I think that was largely due to some of the cultural elements that were preset before I joined there. But I mean, I think you can do it. Granted, it is different. And in the example you used, we would bring people in person for that type of like it's a big strategic decision for like the upcoming product line, that sort of stuff. The closest analog, just as we did often like with samples and things like that at Peloton as well. We were choosing swag for employer brand, and we sent it, had the company send the swag options to every person so that we could keep it as a Zoom meeting. So, there are ways, like you have to spend a little bit to do that. But if you think about the amount of overhead we're saving at this point by not having real estate commitments, it's pretty significant and seems like a small price to pay.
Yeah, I was curious about it because like Wombi's got like, this little thing that looks like, just a greeting card, but that company's all about delivering happiness, and that thing, from a culture brand point of view is so powerful. And a lot of it comes from you as a leader initially, and then seemed to propagate across the company. And I'm just wondering how you were able to navigate that. It sounds like it was a lot less challenging than I would have thought, but bringing on so many people as you grow and keeping the culture.
Yeah, look, I think the key thing is actually all the process that was already in place. Like we have a quarterly rhythm, we have a quarterly planning day where like we just had it on Friday, and you go through every part of the company. This is the first one we've done virtually, but it just means everyone is connected through it. We have like the onboarding process there's a series of meetings where you get to meet all the different functional leaders. And so there's a Tuesday, every Tuesday we come out with a report that is like the whole, performance of the business, what products are selling in what channels, which ones aren't, or what's working, what's not working. And everybody goes through their section, and it's Tuesday, and it's all of like manager level and up in the company, which is roughly half of, or a little more than half probably of our HQ team. But anyone can join. And so I think there's just a lot of those elements you mentioned about transparency of what's going on in the company that's pervasive, just was already pervasive, that made it like not really a big shift. I do think the culture, like there's something just about being around the product physically, which is why we ship, right now we're shipping enormous amounts of product around to people's houses just to make sure that everybody has, stuff that they're looking at, especially in the design team, but even in, other teams, marketing is like, there's just so many love pops going around. We're getting close. We're going to get that office budget used up in shipping costs, but I don't know. I think that's the biggest issue. I think the interesting thing is for every negative in terms of not being in the office and getting to meet people, there's positives in terms of like access through Zoom and other ways that, there's advantages too.
It's an interesting.
Sorry, go ahead, Evan.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, Chris. I was going to relate a quick story of like another CEO of a company called Volt Athletics up in Seattle, who I knew kind of growing up, and they're one of these super fast growing, they're kind of a health company, but what they do is like customized workouts, sort of things like that. So, but more like on the weightlifting, sort of working with the military and with sports teams and things like that. They actually went they did not think that full virtual was going to work for them. They've loved it, and they've now switched to a four-day work week. And so that's part of it as well. Like they were like, hey, we're actually getting more productivity out of people at home, and we give them these longer weekends. And the Friday is now sort of a day of you can kind of do whatever you want. I thought that was a very sort of, not only did they lean into it, but they leaned real hard into it. And they've, I think he just joined, what is it? The Rolling Stone has this new culture council they've launched, and he's on that as sort of a guy who's trying to take an industry that's traditionally sort of very in person, right? Health and stuff, much like Peloton did, try to make that more of a lifestyle commitment to his company. So I thought that was a cool way that he did that.
Hey, Barb, one thing we didn't get into, but I was just curious, in your current role at Peloton, are they thinking about going back in person when, and are they thinking about doing it differently, in terms of?
Yeah, more hybrid, kind of to Bob's point, where the overwhelming majority of employees wanted some mix, right? So that was the largest population. It was the largest population there was not that they wanted all virtual. And that's even with commutes in Manhattan for the majority of those folks. They wanted to be in the office. I think that probably speaks to the in-person environment in the office, the culture, the vibe, that sort of thing. But what we've also done is opened up where we're willing to hire and be more willing to, consider folks in other states, other countries, that sort of thing, to get the right talent. Where we would not have done that before, for sure. Would not have done that pre-COVID, would have forced relocation or passed on the candidate.
And is that more crash pad or is it more cube oriented? Just curious how you're on those remote pods, how you landed there.
Yeah, with like in the how we're setting, or meaning how we're setting up offices differently in person.
Yeah. So I mean, like for example, I know you got to be careful about what you can and can't talk about, but let's say you were going to have a new office in Phoenix for a subset of the population. Like, what does that look like? Does it feel like a coffee shop, or does it feel like I'm walking into cubes?
Yeah, so I don't think we're like locked in on exactly what it will look like, but we know it will be different. We were originally thinking hot desks, but there are like issues with hot desks in terms of sharing of desktops and the need to sanitize and all of that might make people uncomfortable. But we are definitely set on things like more soft seating, more meeting rooms, given that people would be coming into the office for things that involve more than themselves. I would say, the thing I would say though about Peloton's offices, I felt the same about Indeed's offices. They were largely very well designed and very progressive around ample space for collaborative work, like the soft seating all over the place in both of those companies. So I think just more of that. And we had already abandoned cubicles in my last 3 companies altogether. So zero privacy. It's like full, no walls, open office environment for all. And really it is for all.
And that's clearly worked in those cultures, those companies.
Yeah, I mean, the very first time I experienced fully open, I was not a fan. I'm a loud talker on calls, but honestly, I would not go back. I would not go back to sitting in an office like I did at BlackBerry with a door and no windows, and wouldn't do it. I like the energy.
Yeah. And then you just use sort of hot, sort of telephone portal type spaces if you've got private conversations. I would think in HR, one of the challenges, you do need that kind of privacy at times.
Yeah, so that, I mean, in Plano, which is my location, when not in New York, I was like in the middle of a call center. So we just were thoughtful about where I am and how we set that up. One other interesting thing that we're talking about, which I think is really funny, but actually probably pretty important, in a mixed environment, there is like nothing we get more complaints about than people who are virtual joining like a Zoom or something, and then people being in person and that banter that happens. So I'm hearing a lot of companies talk about, even if you're in the office for certain types of meetings, still Zooming in to the meeting from like your workstation. Also, because the biggest benefit we saw from that was this description of a level playing field, especially for businesses that have more than one location. Oftentimes there's a perception of like this power base around certain executives within the organization. When everyone is on Zoom, that accessibility feels much better. And so we saw that on surveys quite frequently, that COVID leveled the playing field for all, regardless of location.
Hey, Evan, I was wondering if you guys at SignalWire come across solutions to that, where you got 2 or 3 people in a physical spot and everyone else is kind of in the Hollywood squares.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, even on the technical side, right, there's an issue with people in the same laptops in the same room where you have like room echo. Someone has to mute and then everyone else has to like, have one thing on. So actually inside here, we've added like in-room echo cancellation. So you can have multiple people in the same room, all with their microphones on, and it'll actually cancel that out. So simple, like little things like that made like for a really bad experience. So remote workers, because the problem is, right, this happens, you see this a lot in meetings with big typical room systems where everyone's at a table far away, you can't see them, everyone's remotely, it feels very impersonal to the people on the far end. So what we found really is that everybody has to be on their own laptop. Like you got to have everybody at least like have the camera. And even if I'm talking to like Jim over here or whatever, I'm talking to Brian over here, they can see us talking to each other and we have all of our earpieces in. And it's like, okay, so like they feel like part of the conversation, much like you would at a normal table if I'm talking to somebody and you're not part of it. And that's been a huge game changer when people get together. It happens frequently with, I think the highest concentration we have right now is in Wisconsin. So when they're together in one spot, that is where that generally happens. But it really like trying to keep it's really about the tone and making sure that, and like it's a lot of what you said, Barb and Bob as well. It really comes from like the top down and enforcing like that culture aspect of what is expected of people who are in person, to include the remote employees. They don't feel left out. And I know I honestly think that the pandemic has accelerated the adoption of this kind of technology and a lot of this thinking by at least half a decade. Like, I really think we were 5 years away at least from getting people to really, truly understand how this works. And so I think what we're running into now is a lot of people, not scared, but like that acceleration is so quick. They're trying to race to catch up.
One of my favorite quotes of the pandemic is another one of our gurus, investors in the fund, is Toby and Harley, the founders of Shopify. And they said, I think it was Toby actually said it first, but Harley's, much better talker and more visible. But he said 2030 arrived 10 years faster.
Yeah.
In every part of their business.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of amazing in that way.
People who are remote in organizations where there are a lot of people in the office have a lot of feelings that they're left out of the information loop. They won't get promotions. There's a lot of angst about that. So if you move in that direction, you really have to work hard to get those people integrated.
And we
got to go to another phone call, so I got to cut out. But thanks.
Hey, Bob, thank you for taking the time. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank
you. Yeah, this is great.
Bob's book comes out, I think, the end of March.
We'll expect 500 books in Vietnam.
We'll get it out to everybody.
We'll get it translated to Vietnamese. So, okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
See you, Wombi.
Bye-bye.
See you, Wombi. So it's been interesting, right? And so I do feel like there's a just wanted to tie off what Bob was saying too. Yeah, like I feel like what we heard from remote employees originally was that they do feel very left out. And you Barb, you nailed it when you were just like, comes to the communication and the oversharing and people being like, you gotta, and the leaders being able to step down and like talk to everybody and make sure that they feel heard and that you're always there. I mean, the thing that Chris was talking about with this interface is like having these rooms open. People are online. Like I have an office that's just, I'm in there. People will like hallway stalk me through different rooms and come find me when I'm alone, or just jump in when I'm like with another engineer they know, or with Anthony, the CEO. And they're like, I got to talk to you both. It's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. If the room's not locked or, it's not obvious that we're discussing something, then like, yeah, everyone's always welcome to stop in. So, but that's culture that we set, right? That's intentional in a lot of ways.
That's my favorite EA for like executive assistant question in a virtual setting is how do you perform the meeting room stalk of an executive that you're chasing down in a virtual environment? So the answer is now SignalWire.
Exactly. Okay. Just keep that thing open. Give them this, send them on. Happy to
Good answer. I have to skedaddle, you guys, but thanks again, Barb. Good to see you guys.
Yeah,
you too. I do have another call. I just wanted to make sure we wrapped up your thought. But
thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
That was great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Interesting conversation. Thanks, guys.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Yeah, I saw DeMarie's bringing you lunch.